Our scripture reading today is Mark 10, verses 46 to 52. And before I begin, a tip that my mother taught me when I was starting to do readings up in front of people was, if you get to a word you don't know how to pronounce it confidently, and then everyone else will think they've always been doing it wrong. So I have seen the name of a beggar being pronounced as Bartimaeus and Bartimaeus. We're going to just say this is a potato-potato type situation. I don't know what the correct pronunciation is. I've always read it as Bartimaeus. That's what I'm going to go for. And if somebody out there wants to correct me, that's fine too. Jesus and his followers came into Jericho. As Jesus was leaving Jericho, together with his disciples and a sizable crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, Timaeus' son, was sitting beside the road. When he heard that Jesus of Nazareth was there, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, show me mercy." Many scolded him, telling him to be quiet, but he shouted even louder, "Son of David, show me mercy." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him forward." They called the blind man, "Be encouraged. Get up. He's calling you." Throwing his coat to the side, he jumped up and came to see Jesus. Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said, "Teacher, I want to see." Jesus said, "Go. Your faith has healed you." At once he was able to see, and he began to follow Jesus on the way. Reflections on Mark 10:46-52. Believing is seeing, with the alternate title being Life Lessons from a Spider. And I'm curious, does anyone here really like spiders? Good. I have to say that I'm indifferent towards a spider. They don't bother me if they're just kind of doing their thing on their web. I don't particularly want to hold one in my hand, although I've been learning a lot about spiders lately because I'm currently reading Charlotte's Web by E.B. White to my son, William. And this is a beautiful story. It's a classic kind of must-read in children's literature. And most of you probably had a teacher bring this out at some point during school in a read aloud or a novel study. But for anyone who is unfamiliar, or if you're like me and it's just been a really long time since you read the book, I'll give you a quick recap. The story opens with 8-year-old Fern crying injustice to her father when he takes an axe to the pig pen with the intention of doing away with the runt of the litter. She cries, he eventually acquiesces. Fern names the little pig Wilbur, and Wilbur goes to live at Uncle Zuckerman's farm, just down the road. Although Fern visits as much as she can, Wilbur is lonely. But he soon makes friends with the animals in the barn, the sheep, the goose, the gander, and the barn spider, Charlotte. All is not well for Wilbur, though, as Uncle Zuckerman plans to sell Wilbur at Christmas time. And one can guess why he's selling a pig that has been fattening up at Christmas time. Charlotte, who has grown quite fond of this lovable pig, sets a plan in motion to trick Zuckerman and save Wilbur's life. Because as she says, "If I can fool a bug, I can surely fool a man. People are not as smart as bugs." Charlotte begins writing a series of words in her web for the people to find when they come to the barn. some pig, terrific, radiant, and humble. When the words first appeared on the web, Mr. Zuckerman called it a miracle. And people from around town came to see Zuckerman's famous pig. When we got to this part of the story, William asked me, "What is a miracle?" And that's a good question. In a series of books called Feasting on the Word, all of them being a collection of essays, and they follow the liturgical calendar. So in that series of books, in one of the essays, Cynthia Jarvis describes miracles as those events that bring people from the darkness into the light. And how interesting is it then that the miracles in Charlotte's Web come from a spider, a creature notorious for living in the shadows and the darkness. Now, when William asked me what a miracle was, I didn't have that answer in my back pocket. So I told him that a miracle was something fantastic, something out of the ordinary, and something that couldn't really be easily explained. The words on the web were a miracle to the people in the town. They could see the words on the web, and they believed what they saw. They were in awe of it, but nobody, with a big asterisk to say, except for Mrs. Zuckerman, could believe that it was a spider who wrote them. I have to imagine now that that's how the people who followed Jesus during that time felt. They were witness to miracles, things that were fantastic, unexpected, definitely out of the realm of normal kind of human explanation. But even though they could see those miracles take place, did they believe truly what they saw? Because today we get another story from Mark surrounding a miracle. From that same collection of essays, Feasting on the Word, another author, Victor McCracken, said, "The Bartimaeus episode serves as the accumulation of a section in Mark's gospel in which Jesus confronts not only the physical blindness of Bartimaeus, but more significantly, the spiritual blindness of his closest followers." Blindness, both physical and spiritual, is a reoccurring theme in the Gospels. Back in Mark 8, 22 to 26, Jesus encounters a blind man in Bethsaida. Jesus takes the man outside the village. He uses his spit and the mud from the river to cover the man's eyes. And then Mark writes, "His eyes were open, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly." This passage is very commonly interpreted as a message around the need for faith, the physical and spiritual healing of Jesus. And then after that, Jesus sent the man on his way, ordering him not to tell anyone what happened. Why? The man now has his physical sight back. But what does he see? Does he see the injustices in the world? Does he see the needs of the poorest? Does he really see and believe in Jesus' message? It would be easy for us to see this story in Mark 10 almost as a repeat. We've heard it before. And while they share some similarities in themes, there are a few notable differences. In Bethsaida, the crowd brings the blind beggar to Jesus. In this story, the crowd actively tries to keep Bartimaeus away. They tell him to be quiet. In their attempt to be close to Jesus and to witness these miracles that he performs, they have blinded themselves to everything else. They no longer see what Jesus is trying to show them. Injustice, suffering, the need to show mercy and compassion to others. They have physical sight, but they don't see what's right there in front of them. Remember that notion of spiritual blindness? Here it is. So eventually, Jesus tells the crowd to let the man through. And it's at that point, everyone changes their tune. And they encourage him to go forward. Go to him. Yes, go to him. Have you ever been around someone who does an about-face like that? They say one thing, but as soon as their friend or someone they admire says something else, they completely go back on it. So this is where I'm going to add a little of my personal opinion to the narrative. Jesus was divine, but he was also human. And he must have been fed up with this. He's been showing them the same message over and over, and yet people still aren't seeing it. He literally just finished telling them how the first must become last, and yet here we are again. When I read this scripture, and when we read this scripture, we usually use kind of a kind and caring voice of, "What do you want me to do for you?" But I kind of hear Jesus frustratingly asking, "What do you want me to do for you?" A question for the crowd, as much as it is for Bartimaeus. So the man responds, "My teacher, let me see again." And maybe this caused Jesus to pause, because it's what he wanted for them all, to see. Another contributor to Feasting on the Word, A.K.M. Adam, comments, Mark deploys these healing stories to underline the contrast between the outsiders who see Jesus and insiders who remain blind to his true identity. Here is Bartimaeus, a physically blind man who actually sees Jesus for who he is, a healer, a teacher, and the divine. More importantly, he wants to see truly the work that Jesus is doing. So Jesus turns to the man and says, "Your faith has healed you." Your faith has healed you. Because before it was Jesus who put spit on his hands and mud on his hands and touched the man in order for him to regain his sight. But Jesus does something different here. In a sense, he doesn't take credit for it. He says, "It is your faith that has healed you. It is your faith that will allow you to see." Because without our own faith in the divine, without belief in the life and the work of Jesus, we remain blind. Believing has to come from within. So the scripture reading ends with, "Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way." This detail is one I missed when I first read it. It's one more thing that makes this scripture reading today so different from the other healing interactions. Remember, when Jesus healed the man in Bethsaida, he did it outside the village. Nobody was a witness, and then he ordered the man to leave and not tell anyone what happened. That doesn't happen here. Quoting Victor McCracken one more time, Having been granted sight, Bartimaeus can do nothing but follow the Messiah who has brought the good news of the kingdom to bear in such a tangible way. This story takes place only a few chapters before Jesus enters Jerusalem. And I have to wonder, do you think Bartimaeus has enough sight to know what is about to happen? Because at this point, the disciples still haven't figured it out. They are the insiders, but due to fear, maybe ignorance, they remain blind. Because in one sense, it's easier to remain blind. When you don't need to see it, you don't need to believe it. So hopefully this hasn't been too long-winded of a way to ask, what does it mean to see Jesus? Bartimaeus sees Jesus, and importantly, he chooses to walk with him as he enters Jerusalem. Can we say the same thing? Do we really see what Jesus has been trying to show us? Are we willing to look straight at the mess, the chaos, the injustices of the world, and actively try to combat it? Do we truly see the people crying out for healing and offer it to them? Do we see and believe in the opportunity to create miracles for others? Because as much as we talk about the grandness of miracles, we have a bad habit of forgetting that we are just as capable of creating miracles as any divine being. Standing up for what is right, offering compassion to those who are kept back, and doing all of this because we believe it is what's right. To believe in Jesus and the work and the messages he gave us, we need to see it all. The good and often the bad. Now, for anyone who hasn't read Charlotte's Web, I won't spoil the ending for you completely. But suffice it to say, Wilbur leads a long and happy life at the Zuckerman's farm. Throughout the story, Charlotte leaves Wilbur and the reader some pretty amazing pieces of wisdom. Well, I won't dispute that spiders can be a little creepy, especially if they, scurry out when you're not expecting it. They are incredible creatures. One really interesting thing about spiders is their eyesight. Maybe this is not surprising to you, but spiders are almost always nearsighted. Unlike humans, they have evolved to be able to see what is right in front of them. Because people, we tend to see what we want to see instead of what is right there. Secondly, Charlotte points out to Wilbur that nobody teaches a spider how to spin a web. If you know anything about spider life cycles, most adult spiders don't see their eggs hatching. This means that there is something deep within a spider, a sense of knowing, a sense of belief, not only how to spin their webs, but why they are supposed to do it. Does it seem miraculous to a spider, do you think, the first time they spin a web and have a fly land in it? Nobody taught them what to do. They just knew they had to do it. Imagine what might happen if people took a few lessons from a spider. What if we started to focus on seeing what was right in front of us? What if we started to believe that deep knowing sense that is within us to see what is right in front of us? If we trusted what we knew to be true, the works and the message of Jesus Christ, And what if we used that belief to see what was right in front of us? What miracles could we offer?